What if the meaning of your life isn't something to be found, but something you are forced to create? What if that terrifying responsibility is, paradoxically, your greatest power? In a world where traditional anchors of meaning, religion, societal norms, inherited values are increasingly questioned, existentialism emerges not just as a philosophy, but as a radical call to action, demanding that we confront the unsettling truth of our boundless freedom. It's a philosophy that suggests the meaning of life isn't something handed down, but something we forge ourselves, choice by agonizing choice. Sartre's existentialism offers a profound, albeit daunting, framework for navigating this crisis of meaning. It places the weight of existence squarely on our shoulders. This isn't just an abstract, intellectual exercise. It's a philosophy with the power to reshape how you live, how you relate to others, and how you understand your place in the vast, indifferent universe. Existentialism proposes that we are condemned to be free, burdened with the responsibility of creating our own values and defining our own essence. Imagine choosing a career path. Is it a calculated step toward financial security or a profound act of self-definition, shaping the very person you will become? At the heart of existentialism lies the principle that existence precedes essence. Consider a knife. It's conceived with a specific purpose, its essence defined before it even exists. Humanity, Sartre argues, is different. We enter the world without a preordained nature or destiny. We simply exist. It is through our actions, our choices, and our engagements with the world that we gradually create our own essence, defining who we are through what we do. Why does any of this matter today? In a world teeming with options, where social media bombards us with curated realities and career paths seem as limitless as they are uncertain, the existential questions of purpose and identity resonate more powerfully than ever. Existentialism isn't some dusty relic of mid-20th century cafes. It's a living philosophy that grapples with the very anxieties that plague modern life, from the pressure to project a perfect image online to the gnawing fear of making the wrong choice. It has a very important impact scale. Understanding existentialism, therefore, isn't just an academic exercise. It's a potentially transformative journey toward living more authentically, toward finding meaning not in external validation, but in the conscious embrace of our freedom and responsibility. It offers a framework for dissecting self-deception, challenging societal expectations, and forging a path that aligns with our deepest values. But what does it mean to live authentically? What does it mean to live without any pre-existing purpose? This journey begins with Jean-Paul Sartre, a towering figure of 20th century thought whose life was as deeply intertwined with political action as it was with philosophical inquiry. His involvement in the French resistance during World War II wasn't merely a biographical detail. It was a crucible that forged his existentialist convictions. For Sartre, abstract philosophical concepts were not enough. They were put to the test in the real world. A central concept in Sartre's philosophy is anguish, the crushing weight of recognizing our total responsibility for everything we do. Imagine a soldier facing a split-second decision that will determine the lives of his comrades. That agonizing moment of choice, stripped bare of all external justifications, encapsulates the essence of existential anguish. It's a feeling we all experience, albeit often in more subtle ways, whenever we confront the implications of our freedom. This anguish can be universal to the human experience. Throughout this exploration, we will grapple with key existential concepts, including the look, le regard, the unsettling awareness of being perceived by others, and how that perception shapes our sense of self and limits our freedom. How much of what you post online is to impress other people? We will examine the concept of bad faith and how it contrasts with authentic existence. Think of someone who claims they had no choice but to follow orders, abdicating their responsibility for the consequences of their actions. Are we truly free, or are we simply puppets of circumstance, deluding ourselves into thinking we have control? By understanding Sartre's existentialism, can we unlock a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the world? Or is it a one-way trip into despair? What if facing our freedom, even though uncomfortable, leads to a more meaningful existence? Join us as we delve into the heart of existentialism, uncovering practical tools and strategies for applying its principles to your own life and overcoming the insidious trap of bad faith. But what does existence precedes essence truly mean? To grasp this, let's contrast a human being with a manufactured object. Consider a carpenter crafting a chair. Before a single piece of wood is cut, the carpenter has a clear idea of the chair's purpose, its function, its very essence. The chair's essence, its reason for being, precedes its physical existence. Now, picture a child being born. Does that child arrive with a predetermined purpose, a fixed identity etched into their being? Sartre would argue no. The child simply exists, entering a world devoid of inherent meaning. It is through their experiences, their choices, their interactions, that they gradually construct their own essence, defining who they are through the life they choose to lead. This principle flips traditional thinking on its head, suggesting that we are not born with a predefined script, but rather authors of our own existence. This leads to the idea that human beings are born as a blank slate. We are born into existence and then define ourselves. We actively participate in our own construction. Consider the choice of a career. Is it simply a means to an end, a way to pay the bills? Or is it a fundamental act of self-definition, shaping your skills, your relationships, your very identity? The existentialist would argue that it is the latter. Every choice, no matter how seemingly insignificant, contributes to the ongoing creation of your essence. Choosing to be a doctor, an artist, an entrepreneur, each path forges a different self. A lifestyle is also very impactful in defining a person. Embracing a life of adventure or a life of quiet contemplation similarly molds one's being. These aren't merely superficial choices, they are the building blocks of who you become. Are you the architect of your own destiny, or are you simply conforming to a blueprint designed by others? Existentialism fundamentally challenges the notion of inherent identities dictated by social roles or expectations. Society often imposes labels upon us: man, woman, worker, leader. But Sartre argues that these labels should not define us. We are not bound by the expectations of our gender, class, or profession. Consider a woman in a patriarchal society who defies expectations to become an engineer. She is not simply fulfilling a preordained role. She is actively creating her own essence, shattering societal norms and paving the way for others. Or take the example of an individual from a disadvantaged background who rises above their circumstances to achieve success. They are not merely overcoming obstacles. They are rewriting their own story, refusing to be defined by their past. In essence, you have the capacity to defy any expectation that does not align with who you truly are. And this concept of existence precedes essence is inextricably linked to freedom and responsibility. Since we enter the world without a predefined essence, we are entirely responsible for creating our own meaning and values. We are, in Sartre's famous phrase, condemned to be free. This is not a freedom to be taken lightly. It is a freedom that carries the immense weight of responsibility. Consider the choice between good and evil. If there is no God, no divine law, no inherent moral code, then the responsibility for defining what is good and what is evil falls squarely upon our shoulders. Choosing to act justly, to alleviate suffering, to stand up for what is right, these are not simply acts of obedience. They are acts of creation, shaping the moral fabric of our world. And similarly, choosing to act selfishly, to inflict harm, to perpetuate injustice, these too are acts of creation, contributing to a world marred by darkness. The implications of this awesome responsibility can feel overwhelming. So how do we navigate this burden of freedom? The recognition of our total responsibility inevitably leads to what Sartre calls anguish. This isn't simply garden variety anxiety. It's a profound existential dread that arises from the awareness that our choices have far-reaching consequences, shaping not only our own lives, but the lives of others, and even the very nature of the world. Imagine a doctor in an emergency room, forced to make a split-second decision that will determine who lives and who dies. The weight of that decision, the knowledge that their choice will have irreversible consequences, encapsulates the essence of existential anguish. Or consider a political leader deciding whether to go to war. The potential ramifications of that decision are staggering, affecting countless lives and shaping the course of history. This anguish isn't a sign of weakness. It's a testament to the gravity of our freedom. But even decisions we make in our daily lives carry the weight of responsibility. Furthermore, existentialists believe we live in a state of abandonment. This refers to the realization that there are no external authorities to guide our choices, no divine commandments, no societal norms, no preordained values. We are alone in our decision-making, cast adrift in a sea of possibilities without a compass. The implications of atheism underscore this point. If there is no God, then there is no ultimate source of meaning or morality. We cannot appeal to a higher power for guidance or justification. We are left to our own devices, responsible for creating our own values and charting our own course. But abandonment isn't limited to religious contexts. It extends to all areas of life. We cannot rely on the government, our parents, or society to tell us what to do. We must think for ourselves and make our own choices. How do you deal with the loneliness of being the sole author of your choices? Existentialists also grapple with the concept of despair. This isn't simply feeling sad or discouraged. It's the acknowledgement that we can only act on what is within our power. We cannot rely on hope, faith, or external forces to solve our problems. We must accept the limits of our control and focus on what we can actually change. Consider the political activist fighting for social justice. They may dream of a world free from oppression and inequality, but they cannot simply wish that world into existence. They can only affect change through concrete actions, organizing protests, lobbying politicians, and raising awareness. They must accept the limitations of their power and focus on what they can realistically achieve, or consider someone facing a personal tragedy. They may yearn for a different outcome, but they cannot undo the past. They can only focus on healing, rebuilding, and moving forward. Are you willing to accept the limits of your control and focus on what you can change? But despair, though initially frightening, can be a source of empowerment. By acknowledging the limits of our control, we can free ourselves from unrealistic expectations and focus our energy on what truly matters. A recovering alcoholic, for example, cannot erase their past mistakes or guarantee a future free from temptation. They can only focus on staying sober in the present moment, one day at a time. This acceptance of limitations, this focus on the present, can be incredibly liberating. It allows us to find meaning and purpose in the face of uncertainty and adversity. It fosters resilience, self-reliance, and a deep appreciation for the power of our own actions. However, the weight of freedom, the anguish of responsibility, and the loneliness of abandonment can be overwhelming. It's tempting to escape from these burdens, to deny our freedom and responsibility. This is where bad faith, or mauvaise foi, comes into play. Bad faith is a form of self-deception in which we attempt to evade the anguish of freedom by attributing our actions to external forces or societal expectations. It's a way of saying, I had no choice, as if we were merely puppets of circumstance, devoid of agency. Imagine someone who commits a crime and then claims they were simply following orders. They are attempting to evade responsibility for their actions by blaming an external authority. There are many ways to manifest bad faith in our lives. One common manifestation is conforming to societal roles, suppressing our individuality in order to fit in. We might adopt certain behaviors, beliefs, or values simply because they are expected of us, without questioning whether they align with our true selves. Another common form of bad faith is blaming circumstances for our failures or unhappiness. We might attribute our lack of success to bad luck, unfair treatment, or external obstacles, rather than taking responsibility for our own choices and actions. Still another example is seeking validation from others. We might constantly seek approval, praise, or recognition from others in order to feel worthy, rather than developing our own internal sense of self-worth. A waiter who overly embodies the role of waiter, performing the expected gestures and behaviors with exaggerated enthusiasm, may be engaging in bad faith, attempting to define himself solely by his profession, rather than confronting his own freedom and individuality. Someone who buys things they can't afford to impress others are also participating in bad faith. And bad faith is not without consequences. It leads to inauthenticity, alienation, and a profound lack of fulfillment. By denying our freedom, we prevent ourselves from living genuinely, from pursuing our passions, and from creating our own meaning. We become actors in a play written by others, rather than authors of our own lives. Imagine someone who stays in a job they hate simply because it is expected of them. They may find themselves feeling trapped, resentful, and ultimately unfulfilled. They are sacrificing their own happiness and well-being in order to conform to external expectations. In essence, bad faith is a trap that prevents us from realizing our full potential. How can we break free from this trap and embrace an authentic existence? The antidote to bad faith is authenticity. Authenticity is about embracing our freedom and responsibility, living in accordance with our own values, and being true to ourselves, even when it's difficult. It requires a willingness to confront the anguish of freedom, to acknowledge our own limitations, and to take ownership of our choices. It's about living a life that is aligned with our deepest values, rather than simply conforming to external expectations. Consider someone who quits a stable, well-paying job to pursue their passion for art. They are not simply making a career change. They are making a statement about their values, their priorities, and their commitment to living an authentic life. How can we cultivate authenticity in our own lives? But our quest for authenticity doesn't occur in a vacuum. We are constantly interacting with others, and these interactions shape our sense of self. Sartre explored this phenomenon through his concept of the look, le regard. The look refers to our awareness of being perceived by others and how this perception impacts our self-understanding. When we are being watched, we become objects in the eyes of others, and this can affect our freedom and responsibility. Imagine walking down the street and suddenly realizing that someone is staring at you. You immediately become self-conscious, aware of your appearance, your movements, your every action. You are no longer simply a subject, acting freely in the world. You have become an object, being judged and evaluated by another. The look can lead to feelings of shame or pride, depending on how we perceive others' judgments of us. If we believe that others are judging us favorably, we may feel proud, confident, and self-assured. If, on the other hand, we believe that others are judging us negatively, we may feel ashamed, embarrassed, and insecure. Imagine tripping and falling in public. The immediate feeling is often one of shame, of being exposed and vulnerable in the eyes of others. Or imagine receiving a heartfelt compliment from someone you admire. The feeling is often one of pride, of being seen and appreciated for who you are. In both cases, our emotions are shaped by our perception of how others are viewing us. Furthermore, the look can contribute to objectification, particularly in the context of gender and race. When individuals are valued primarily for their physical appearance or their membership in a particular group, they are being reduced to objects, stripped of their individuality and agency. Think of a woman who is constantly judged by her appearance, her value reduced to her physical attractiveness. Or think of a person of color who is stereotyped and discriminated against based on their race. In both cases, the look perpetuates inequality and injustice. How can we resist the objectifying gaze of others and embrace our own subjectivity? Ultimately, existentialism encourages us to embrace our own subjectivity and resist the pressure to conform to others' expectations. We are not simply objects to be judged and evaluated. We are subjects, capable of creating our own meaning and living authentically. Consider someone who rejects conventional beauty standards, embracing their natural appearance and celebrating their unique qualities. They are not simply defying societal norms. They are reclaiming their own subjectivity, refusing to be defined by external expectations. They are saying, "I am who I am, and I am proud of it." What does it take to achieve this level of self-acceptance and self-love? Diving deeper, bad faith is not simply a matter of telling lies. It's a more insidious and pervasive phenomenon, a constant process of self-deception where we subtly distort our own freedom to alleviate the anguish of responsibility. It's not an isolated incident, but an ongoing negotiation with our own consciousness, a dance between acknowledging our agency and surrendering to the comfort of perceived determinism. The more we attempt to hide from our existential freedom, the more deeply entrenched we become in bad faith, creating a vicious cycle of inauthenticity and self-denial. Understanding this nuanced definition is crucial because it highlights the ever-present temptation to evade the weight of our choices, to seek refuge in the illusion of external control. How often do we find ourselves unconsciously constructing narratives that absolve us of responsibility, blaming circumstances or others for the direction of our lives? Consider the student who receives a poor grade on an exam. It's easy to attribute the failure to a biased teacher, an unfair test, or a lack of resources. But this explanation conveniently overlooks the student's own lack of preparation, their procrastination, or their ineffective study habits. By shifting the blame outward, the student avoids confronting the painful reality of their own choices and their consequences. Or think of the employee who consistently works late, complaining about the demands of their job and the expectations of their boss. While there may be legitimate pressures at play, this narrative often masks the employee's own inability to set boundaries, to prioritize tasks, or to effectively manage their time. They claim they had to work late, ignoring their own agency in shaping their work life. We can also consider a person who finds themselves unhappy. They may blame a struggling economy, the behavior of their friends, or the nature of their career. But this conveniently ignores that they are completely in charge of their own emotions and actions. How often do we construct elaborate narratives that shield us from the discomfort of self-awareness? What drives us to engage in this constant charade of self-deception? Why do we so readily surrender our freedom and embrace the illusion of determinism? At its core, bad faith stems from a deep-seated fear of freedom, a terror of the unknown, and a desperate yearning for security. The sheer magnitude of our responsibility can be paralyzing. The realization that every choice shapes our essence can be overwhelming. In addition, the look plays a role in bad faith, with the individual trying to take the easiest route in order to obtain external validation. By conforming to societal expectations, by adopting predefined roles, we seek to minimize the risk of judgment and rejection, trading authenticity for acceptance. Isn't the appeal of social media rooted in this desire for external validation, where we curate idealized versions of ourselves, seeking approval from strangers to fill an inner void? Sartre further illuminates the concept of bad faith through the figure of the serious man. The serious man is someone who wholeheartedly embraces predefined values and roles without questioning their origins or their validity. They find solace in external authorities, whether it be religious dogma, political ideology, or societal norms, surrendering their own judgment in favor of established doctrines. The serious man seeks to eliminate the ambiguity and uncertainty of existence by clinging to rigid systems of belief, effectively outsourcing their responsibility to external sources. The appeal of the serious man lies in the promise of order, stability, and a clear sense of purpose in a world that often feels chaotic and meaningless. But this sense of purpose comes at a steep price, the sacrifice of individual freedom and the suppression of authentic self-expression. In what ways do we find ourselves drawn to the allure of the serious man, seeking refuge in prepackaged ideologies and unquestioned beliefs. But to what extent is our embrace of bad faith simply a reflection of societal pressures? Are we truly free to choose our own essence, or are we merely puppets of circumstance, molded by the forces of social conditioning? Perhaps the masks we wear are simply a reflection of a society that demands conformity, leaving us little room to express our authentic selves. To further analyze this phenomenon, we must consider the mask in detail to understand how we adopt personas to meet societal expectations. The mask is not merely a social role, such as being a teacher or a doctor. It is a carefully constructed facade designed to deceive both ourselves and others. It's the difference between performing a job and becoming consumed by it, losing sight of your own values and desires. The mask is a form of bad faith in action, an attempt to escape the anguish of freedom by hiding behind a prefabricated identity. Consider the perfect spouse who meticulously maintains an image of marital bliss on social media, while privately grappling with deep dissatisfaction and resentment. Or consider the dedicated employee who sacrifices their personal life and well-being to climb the corporate ladder, only to realize they've become a hollow shell of their former self. They may adopt the persona of a workaholic to hide from their fears, loneliness, or lack of fulfillment outside of work. These masks aren't just about deceiving others. They're about deceiving ourselves into believing that we are living authentically, when in reality, we are simply playing a part. How often do we curate our lives to project an image of success and happiness, even when we feel empty inside? The psychological roots of mask-wearing lie in our primal desire for approval and our fear of rejection. From a young age, we learn that certain behaviors and traits are rewarded while others are punished. This conditioning leads us to develop a false self, a persona created to meet the perceived needs of others, often at the expense of our own true self. Carl Jung wrote extensively on this subject, postulating that individuals develop a persona, a social mask, to navigate the world and conceal aspects of themselves they deem unacceptable. This false self becomes a barrier, preventing us from forming genuine connections and living authentically. The true self, by contrast, is authentic and free to create meaning. Are we so afraid of being unloved that we sacrifice our authenticity for the sake of fitting in? The people-pleaser exemplifies the false self. This individual constantly puts others' needs before their own, neglecting their own desires and boundaries in a desperate attempt to gain approval. They may agree to tasks they don't have time for, suppress their own opinions to avoid conflict, or sacrifice their own well-being to make others happy. Over time, the people-pleaser loses touch with their own authentic self, becoming a chameleon who adapts to the expectations of others. This behavior also reflects the look, with the person seeking external validation through their actions. They may wake up one day and wonder, who am I, really? Recognizing the masks we wear is the first step towards reclaiming our authenticity. One technique is to keep a journal, documenting our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in different social situations. By reflecting on these entries, we can begin to identify patterns of inauthenticity, moments where we feel like we are performing rather than being ourselves. Ask yourself, am I saying what I truly believe or what I think others want to hear? Another strategy is to practice vulnerability, gradually revealing our true selves to trusted individuals. Start with small steps, sharing a personal fear or a dissenting opinion, and observe how it feels. It's by dropping the mask and being honest that one finds authenticity and meaning. However, is it always possible to choose our actions, or are our choices predetermined by factors beyond our control? The question of free will versus determinism has haunted philosophers for centuries. Determinism argues that all events, including our choices, are causally determined by prior events, leaving no room for genuine freedom. From this perspective, our sense of agency is merely an illusion, a byproduct of complex brain processes that are themselves governed by immutable laws of nature. The scientific arguments for determinism often draw on neuroscience and genetics, suggesting that our choices are ultimately determined by our brain chemistry and our inherited predispositions. The nature versus nurture debate highlights this tension, with proponents of nature arguing that our genes dictate our behavior, while proponents of nurture emphasize the role of environmental factors. If our brains are simply biological machines responding to stimuli, can we truly be held responsible for our actions? Existentialism, however, stands firmly on the side of free will, asserting that we are radically free to choose our own essence, regardless of external influences. Sartre argued that consciousness itself is the source of free will, that our ability to reflect on our own existence and make choices distinguishes us from inanimate objects and animals driven by instinct. Even in the face of deterministic arguments, existentialists maintain that we always have a choice in how we respond to external factors. We may not be able to control the circumstances of our lives, but we can control our attitude towards those circumstances, our interpretation of events, and our response to challenges. Even if our choices are influenced by our genes and our environment, the final decision rests with us. Is it possible to reconcile these seemingly irreconcilable views? Perhaps freedom and determinism are not mutually exclusive. We can acknowledge the influence of external factors on our choices, while still maintaining that we have the power to choose how we respond to those influences. This perspective suggests that our freedom is not absolute, but rather constrained by the limits of our biology, our environment, and our past experiences. However, within those constraints, we still have a range of possibilities to choose from. We are not simply puppets of fate, but rather active agents who shape our own destiny within the context of our circumstances. Even if our choices are partly determined, the act of choosing itself is an expression of our freedom. If we accept that our choices are our own, how do we create meaning? The absence of inherent meaning can be unsettling, leading some to nihilism, the belief that life is ultimately meaningless and without value. Critics of existentialism often point to this potential for nihilism, arguing that its emphasis on individual freedom and responsibility leads to a sense of despair and alienation. If there is no objective purpose to life, no divine plan to guide us, then what is the point of anything? Why bother striving for anything if it all ultimately ends in death and oblivion? The lack of inherent purpose, coupled with the intense responsibility that Sartre preaches, may understandably lead some to depression. Existentialists argue that the absence of objective meaning does not mean that life is meaningless. Rather, it means that we have the freedom to create our own subjective meaning and purpose. Meaning is not something to be discovered, but something to be created through our choices, our actions, and our relationships. We are not born with a predefined purpose, but we can create our own purpose by aligning our lives with our values, pursuing our passions, and contributing to something larger than ourselves. The key is to embrace the freedom to define our own values and create a meaningful life, rather than passively accepting prepackaged ideologies or societal expectations. How do we actively construct new meaning in our lives? Living in accordance with our values can serve as a powerful source of meaning and purpose. Identifying our core values, the principles that guide our decisions and actions, provides a compass for navigating the complexities of life. Authenticity is intrinsically linked to values. We are not being authentic if we are violating our core values in our day-to-day lives. Whether it's honesty, compassion, creativity, or justice, living in alignment with our values provides a sense of integrity and purpose, grounding us in something meaningful. Furthermore, by setting meaningful goals, we can pursue them. Even when we fail, we can take solace in the fact that we were at least working toward a concrete and important goal. But what activities can bring meaning to life? Meaningful activities can take many forms, from pursuing creative passions to building meaningful relationships to contributing to society. Engaging in activities that challenge us, that push us beyond our comfort zones and that allow us to express our unique talents and abilities can provide a sense of fulfillment and purpose. Building strong, authentic relationships with others based on mutual respect and understanding provides a sense of connection and belonging, reminding us that we are not alone in our struggles. Contributing to society through acts of service, advocacy, or simply being a responsible citizen can give us a sense of purpose and make a positive impact on the world around us. The most important element is that one must take actions based on their authentic self instead of bad faith for an activity to be meaningful. But how do we apply these principles to our relationships with others? Traditional relationship models often promote dependency, control, or adherence to societal expectations, undermining individual freedom and authenticity. Relationships based on dependency create an imbalance of power, where one partner relies on the other for their sense of self-worth and validation. Relationships based on control seek to limit the other person's freedom and autonomy, stifling their personal growth. And relationships based on societal expectations often force individuals to conform to predefined roles, sacrificing their own desires and needs. People-pleasing further complicates things, as one or both parties may constantly sacrifice what they want to make the other happy. Instead, fostering authentic connections necessitates prioritizing open, honest, and vulnerable communication. Expressing our true feelings and desires, even when it's difficult, is essential for building trust and intimacy. Sharing our fears, our insecurities, and our vulnerabilities allows our partners to see us for who we truly are, fostering a deeper sense of connection. This requires a willingness to be authentic, to shed the masks we wear and reveal our true selves, even if it means risking rejection or disapproval. While this can seem scary, this type of communication fosters a healthy and fulfilling relationship because all parties understand each other's needs. How can we make our wants known in a relationship? Healthy relationships thrive on mutual respect for each other's freedom and responsibility. Recognizing that each partner is an autonomous individual with their own unique values, goals, and desires is essential for maintaining a balanced and fulfilling relationship. Supporting each other's individual goals, encouraging each other's personal growth, and respecting each other's boundaries are all ways to demonstrate this mutual respect. This approach fosters a sense of independence and autonomy within the relationship, allowing each partner to pursue their own path while still maintaining a strong connection. While these are lofty goals, navigating conflict authentically is also required. Navigating conflict in a way that honors each partner's authenticity and promotes understanding requires a willingness to listen, to empathize, and to compromise. Instead of seeking to dominate or control the other person, the goal should be to find a solution that respects both partners' needs and values. This requires a willingness to set aside our ego, to acknowledge our own flaws, and to take responsibility for our own actions. It also requires a willingness to engage in honest and respectful dialogue, even when it's uncomfortable, to find common ground and build a stronger foundation for the relationship. So what do these existentialist principles look like in practice? Consider the career changer, someone who leaves a stable but unfulfilling job to pursue their passion, despite the risks and uncertainties involved. This individual embodies the existentialist principle of freedom and responsibility, taking ownership of their own life and making a choice that aligns with their values. Or consider the social activist, an individual who takes responsibility for fighting injustice and inequality, even in the face of opposition and adversity. This person demonstrates the existentialist commitment to creating meaning through action, using their freedom to make a positive impact on the world. The artist, as existentialist, uses their work to explore existential themes, challenging norms, and expressing their unique perspective on the human condition. Similarly, the individualist challenges groupthink to embrace personal authenticity, even when facing negative consequences. It's important to remember that these examples aren't about achieving traditional notions of success, but about living authentically and taking responsibility for one's choices, even when it's difficult. While society may not reward these people, they are living a more fulfilling life than one of bad faith. But isn't existentialism itself a rather depressing philosophy? A common criticism is that existentialism is a pessimistic and depressing philosophy, focusing on the negative aspects of life, such as the absurdity of existence, the inevitability of death, and the burden of freedom. Critics argue that its emphasis on individual responsibility and the lack of inherent meaning can lead to a sense of despair and alienation. The acknowledgement of the challenges and uncertainties of life can, for some, seem like a burden rather than an empowerment. However, existentialists offer a different perspective. Existentialism is not inherently pessimistic, but rather realistic. It acknowledges the challenges and uncertainties of life, but it also emphasizes our freedom and responsibility to create our own meaning and purpose. It recognizes the inherent absurdity of existence, but it also celebrates our ability to transcend that absurdity through our choices and our actions. Far from being depressing, existentialism can be empowering, reminding us that we are not victims of circumstance, but rather active agents who shape our own destiny. By embracing our freedom and taking responsibility for our choices, we can create a life that is meaningful, fulfilling, and authentic. Yet it is also said that existentialism promotes selfishness. It's been said that existentialism promotes selfishness and disregards social connections. While existentialism emphasizes individual responsibility, it also recognizes the importance of our relationships with others and our obligations to society. Sartre himself was deeply engaged in political activism, using his philosophy to advocate for social justice and human rights. Existentialism does not advocate for a narcissistic pursuit of individual gratification, but rather a responsible exercise of freedom that takes into account the needs and well-being of others. By living authentically, we can inspire others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of positive change in the world. We can live authentically while also participating in our social circles. Finally, what about the concept of absurdity? The existentialist concept of absurdity does not mean that life is meaningless or without value. Rather, it means that there is no inherent or preordained meaning, that the universe is indifferent to our existence, and that we are free to create our own meaning and purpose. This can be a daunting realization, but it is also liberating. The absence of inherent meaning frees us from the constraints of societal expectations, religious dogma, and prepackaged ideologies, allowing us to define our own values and create a life that is truly our own. The absurdity of existence is not a cause for despair, but rather an invitation to create our own meaning and to live authentically in a world without guarantees. Authenticity is a concept often thrown around, but what does it truly mean from an existentialist perspective? It goes far beyond simple honesty, which can sometimes be a mere recounting of facts without any deeper self-awareness. Authenticity, in existential terms, is an active and continuous process of self-creation. It's about consciously aligning our actions with our self-defined values and boldly embracing our freedom to choose who we become. It demands an unrelenting commitment to self-awareness and a willingness to challenge societal norms. This constant process of aligning ourselves with our values is a defining act of freedom. Consider the individual who is always honest about their feelings, openly expressing their likes and dislikes. While honesty is a virtue, it doesn't necessarily equate to authenticity. This person might still conform to societal expectations, pursuing a career path chosen by their parents, or maintaining relationships that stifle their personal growth. They may be honest about their feelings within the confines of these external pressures, but they are not truly living authentically, as they are not actively shaping their own existence. Authenticity asks more of us than just telling the truth. It demands that we question why we believe it. Are we choosing to be honest because it aligns with our values, or are we being honest because we are afraid of the consequences of being dishonest? This self-examination highlights the distinction between passive honesty and active authenticity, underlining the existential demand for continuous self-creation. So how does authenticity contrast with bad faith? Authenticity stands as the polar opposite of living in bad faith, that act of self-deception where we attempt to evade our freedom and responsibility. The authentic individual confronts their fears head-on, acknowledging their existence and making conscious choices in spite of them, thereby exercising their freedom. They recognize that fear is an emotion they can choose to grapple with, to integrate, and to grow from. Conversely, the individual mired in bad faith seeks refuge in excuses, attributing their inaction to external circumstances and relinquishing their agency. For example, imagine a person with a deep fear of public speaking who actively seeks out opportunities to present, viewing it as a chance to overcome their anxiety and expand their comfort zone. This individual is embracing authenticity, choosing to confront their fear and define their own limits. Now, consider someone with the same fear who consistently avoids public speaking engagements, citing a lack of time, a fear of judgment, or a belief that they are simply not good at it. This person is operating in bad faith, allowing their fear to dictate their choices and limiting their potential for growth. This choice to embrace or evade personal fears showcases the critical divergence between authenticity and bad faith. It highlights how the authentic life is a path of active self-creation, while the inauthentic one is a retreat into self-imposed limitations. How can we begin to explore and practice authenticity? Authenticity demands a profound understanding of our own motivations, desires, and values. Knowing what you want is only half the battle. Understanding why you want it is where true self-awareness begins. Introspection and self-reflection are not optional extras on the path to authenticity. They are indispensable tools for uncovering the hidden forces that shape our choices. What are the origins of our desires? Are they reflections of our authentic selves or echoes of societal expectations and past traumas? Consider the aspiring entrepreneur driven by a desire for financial independence and creative expression. Knowing that they want to start a business is a good start, but to achieve authenticity, they must delve deeper. Why do they want financial independence? Is it to escape the constraints of a corporate job, to provide for their family, or to prove their worth to others? Why do they want creative expression? Is it to share their unique vision with the world, to find an outlet for their emotions, or to gain recognition and validation? By understanding the underlying motivations, they can ensure that their actions align with their authentic selves and not simply chase after fleeting goals. How do we achieve this high degree of self-knowledge, however? Living authentically is undeniably difficult, not because it demands perfection, but because it requires unwavering self-honesty. It involves confronting uncomfortable truths about ourselves, challenging societal norms, and embracing the vulnerability that comes with being truly seen. To be authentic is to be imperfect, to be a work in progress. Living authentically isn't a destination. It's a journey of continuous self-discovery, a willingness to adapt and evolve as we learn more about ourselves and the world around us. Imagine the struggle of an individual trapped in a career they despise, yet bound by financial obligations and family expectations. Or consider the person in a relationship that no longer aligns with their values, yet paralyzed by fear of loneliness or societal judgment. These are the everyday battles of authenticity, the moments where we must choose between conforming to external pressures and honoring our inner selves. The path to authenticity is rarely easy, but it is always worth pursuing. What happens, though, when our external realities limit our freedom? Existentialism acknowledges that our freedom exists within very real constraints. We are not born into a blank slate, free to create ourselves from nothing. Instead, we are confronted with facticity, those aspects of our existence that are beyond our control. Our past, our physical body, our circumstances of birth, these are the givens of our lives, the raw materials with which we must work. We do not choose our parents, our birthplace, or our genetic predispositions. These facts are simply thrust upon us, shaping the landscape of our existence. Is this a source of despair or a challenge to overcome? While facticity undeniably shapes our experience, it does not negate our freedom. It provides the context within which we exercise our agency, the canvas upon which we paint our lives. We retain the power to choose how we respond to our circumstances, how we interpret our past, and how we utilize our physical abilities. Our facticity sets the stage, but it does not write the script. Take, for example, a person born into poverty. Their circumstances of birth undoubtedly present significant challenges, limiting their access to education, health care, and opportunities. However, their facticity does not predetermine their destiny. They can still choose to pursue education, start a business, or become involved in their community. They may face greater obstacles than someone born into privilege, but they are not powerless. Their choices, their resilience, and their determination can transform their circumstances and create a life of meaning and purpose. Is facticity, then, a limitation or a challenge? The interplay between freedom and facticity is a constant dance, a negotiation between our desires and our limitations. We are always making choices within a specific set of circumstances, navigating the currents of our past and responding to the demands of our present. This tension can be a source of both frustration and creativity, pushing us to find innovative solutions and to redefine our understanding of what is possible. Every choice we make reshapes our reality, further influencing the dynamic between freedom and facticity. Consider the choices faced by an individual living with a chronic illness. Their physical limitations may restrict their ability to engage in certain activities, impacting their career options, social life, and personal pursuits. However, they retain the freedom to choose how they respond to their illness, whether they embrace it as an opportunity for growth or succumb to despair. They can choose to focus on their abilities, to seek out new forms of expression, and to build meaningful relationships within the context of their limitations. They can choose to redefine their definition of a fulfilling life, finding joy and purpose in unexpected places. How can we accept our limitations without being defined by them? Accepting our facticity is not about resignation or self-pity, but about embracing reality. Denying or ignoring our limitations is a form of bad faith, an attempt to escape the truth of our existence. True authenticity requires us to acknowledge our limitations, to understand their impact on our choices, and to find creative ways to work within their boundaries. This acceptance allows us to focus our energy on what we can control, to make the most of our freedom within the context of our facticity. Imagine an athlete who refuses to acknowledge their physical limitations and pushes themselves beyond their capacity, risking serious injury. Or consider the individual who clings to an idealized vision of their past, refusing to accept the changes that have occurred in their life. These individuals are operating in bad faith, denying their facticity and hindering their ability to live authentically. The acceptance of our limitations is not a sign of weakness, but a prerequisite for self-discovery and growth. Does this mean that we should surrender to our emotions? Sartre offered the radical view that emotions are not simply involuntary responses, but rather choices we make to engage with the world. Emotions are ways of understanding and relating to our experiences, a kind of language we use to interpret our surroundings and our interactions. This isn't to say emotions are fake, but they are choices we make about how we will allow things to affect us. Are we truly victims of our own feelings? Sartre posited that we often choose to feel certain emotions as a strategy, a way to navigate the complexities of life. We select the emotions that best serve our goals, even if those goals are unconscious or self-destructive. We may become angry to justify an action, sadness to elicit sympathy, or fear to avoid responsibility. Emotions, then, become tools we use to shape our perception of reality and to influence the behavior of others. If we feel like victims of an emotion, could we actually be controlling it for our own purposes? Consider the individual who habitually resorts to anger when faced with a challenge. They may claim that they couldn't help but get angry, that their anger was a natural and justified response to the situation. However, Sartre would argue that their anger is a choice, a strategy they employ to avoid taking responsibility for their actions. By becoming angry, they can shift the blame onto others, justify their inaction, and avoid confronting their own insecurities. This is not to say that anger is never justified, but rather that we should be aware of the ways in which we use our emotions to manipulate ourselves and others. Isn't it true that we often rationalize the way we feel, even if it hurts us and others? We often believe that our emotions are justified by external circumstances, that we are simply reacting to the events that unfold around us. However, Sartre challenged this notion, arguing that we often use emotions to rationalize our actions or avoid responsibility. We may claim that we couldn't help feeling a certain way, implying that our emotions are beyond our control. However, Sartre suggests that we choose to interpret events in a way that elicits a particular emotional response, allowing us to justify our subsequent behavior. Imagine someone who lashes out at a loved one, claiming that they couldn't help getting angry because they were stressed out at work. While the stress from work may have contributed to their emotional state, Sartre would argue that they still had a choice in how they responded. They could have chosen to communicate their feelings calmly, to seek support from their partner, or to take a break to distress. Instead, they chose to express their anger, using their emotions to justify their outburst and avoid taking responsibility for their actions. How, then, can we take charge of our emotional responses? Taking responsibility for our emotions empowers us to make more conscious choices, to break free from the cycle of reactive behavior, and to live more authentically. It requires us to acknowledge that our emotions are not simply things that happen to us, but rather choices we make about how to engage with the world. By recognizing the power of our emotions, we can begin to cultivate a more intentional and fulfilling existence. What does this entail? One simple strategy is to recognize and manage triggers that lead to specific emotions, such as anger or anxiety. By identifying the people, places, or situations that tend to provoke these feelings, we can develop coping mechanisms to manage our responses. We might practice mindfulness techniques, such as deep breathing or meditation, to calm our nervous system and regain control of our emotions. We might also challenge the thoughts and beliefs that contribute to our emotional reactions, questioning their validity and exploring alternative perspectives. What happens, though, when we can't rely on moral codes? Existentialism rejects the notion of predefined moral codes and external authorities. There is no universal right or wrong, no divine law or societal norm that can dictate our choices. We are condemned to be free, and that freedom extends to our moral decisions. This realization can be both liberating and terrifying. What do we do without a moral compass? Without these predetermined guidelines, we may feel lost in a sea of possibilities, unsure of how to navigate the complexities of ethical dilemmas. This uncertainty can lead to doubt and fear as we grapple with the weight of our responsibility. We may yearn for the comfort of a clear set of rules, a moral authority that can tell us what to do, but existentialism offers no such solace. How, then, do we navigate the treacherous waters of moral ambiguity? In the absence of objective morality, we must create our own values and use them as a guide for our actions. These values are not imposed upon us by an external authority, but rather chosen by us, based on our understanding of ourselves, our relationships, and our place in the world. Our personal values become our own moral compass, guiding us through the uncertainties of life and shaping our decisions. It is not enough to simply adopt prepackaged values from our family, our culture, or our religion. We must critically examine these values, question their validity, and decide whether they truly align with our authentic selves. If we don't, can we truly call them our own? We are responsible not only for our choices, but also for the values upon which those choices are based. This is a profound responsibility, as it means that we are constantly creating our own moral code, defining what is right and wrong through our actions. Every decision we make, no matter how small, is a reflection of our values, a statement about what we believe is important in life. By carefully considering our values and aligning our actions with them, we can create a life of meaning, purpose, and authenticity. How can we transform these concepts into actionable strategies? To cultivate authenticity, we must incorporate a range of strategies and practices into our daily lives. Authenticity isn't a switch we can simply flip. Instead, it is a continuous process. To start, promote self-reflection. Engage in regular introspection to identify your values, motivations, and those sneaky patterns of bad faith that may be holding you back. Writing in a journal helps, but it is also useful to meditate or even seek therapy. Similarly, it's helpful to challenge societal expectations. But how do we do that? Question societal norms and expectations rather than blindly conforming to them. Identify areas where you feel pressured to act inauthentically and explore alternative ways of behaving. Talk with a trusted friend or family member to see if your values align with your actions. Embrace vulnerability and be open and honest about your feelings and desires, even when it's difficult. Practice vulnerability in safe and supportive relationships. Do you find yourself agreeing with people even when you don't? Take concrete steps to align your actions with your values, even if it involves risk or discomfort. Make small changes in your daily life to reflect your authentic self. End a relationship that no longer aligns with your values, or pursue a career path that truly excites you, even if it's unconventional. It's a journey that demands courage, self-awareness, and a willingness to embrace the unknown. To underscore the transformative power of authenticity, let's consider the life of Nelson Mandela. Mandela made difficult choices that positively impacted the world, choosing to fight against apartheid in South Africa, despite facing imprisonment and persecution. His unwavering commitment to justice and equality, even in the face of immense adversity, embodies the existentialist ideal of creating meaning through action. Mandela's life serves as a reminder that we have the power to shape our own destiny, to challenge injustice, and to make a positive impact on the world around us. Even with all of this said, what is the impact of the look? Sartre called this phenomenon the look, the realization that we are not just subjects experiencing the world, but also objects being perceived by others. This awareness profoundly impacts our self-understanding and consequently our freedom and responsibility. The look can be a source of self-consciousness, anxiety, and a feeling of being trapped in a role defined by others' expectations. But how has this concept evolved in the digital age, where our lives are increasingly lived online? Social media platforms have amplified the look to an unprecedented degree. The internet has intensified the gaze. We are constantly aware of being observed, judged, and evaluated by a vast, often anonymous audience. Every post, every picture, every comment is a performance, a carefully curated presentation of ourselves designed to elicit a specific response. Likes, comments, and followers have become a form of external validation, shaping our sense of self-worth and influencing our behavior. The insidious part of this, of course, is how unconscious this process has become. It can become increasingly challenging to distinguish between our authentic selves and the carefully constructed online personas we present to the world. Are we living our lives, or are we simply performing for an audience? This constant performance of identity can lead to inauthenticity and a profound disconnect from our true selves. We may find ourselves conforming to trends, adopting opinions that are not our own, or exaggerating our achievements in order to gain social approval. The pressure to maintain a perfect online image can be exhausting, leading to anxiety, depression, and a sense of emptiness. We become trapped in a cycle of seeking external validation, sacrificing our genuine desires and values in the process. If we're always trying to impress others, how can we ever truly know ourselves? Navigating social media authentically requires mindful usage and a commitment to self-reflection. We must be aware of the ways in which these platforms influence our thoughts and behaviors and actively resist the pressure to conform. This isn't to say that we must abandon social media altogether, but rather that we must use it intentionally, aligning our online engagement with our values. We can choose to share content that is meaningful to us, to connect with others in a genuine way, and to resist the temptation to compare ourselves to others. We can also set boundaries, limiting our time on social media and prioritizing real-life experiences. By doing so, we reclaim control over our identities and cultivate a more authentic connection with ourselves and the world. Even so, how can we make peace with a world where we have so little control? One of the most fundamental human desires is the longing for certainty and security. We crave stability, predictability, and a sense of control over our lives. This desire can lead us to cling to rigid beliefs, seek validation from external sources, or avoid taking risks. We might try to find certainty in relationships, careers, or ideologies. However, the pursuit of certainty is often an illusion, a futile attempt to escape the inherent ambiguity of existence. Life is inherently uncertain and unpredictable. Despite our best efforts, we cannot control every aspect of our lives. Illness, loss, and unexpected events can disrupt our plans and shatter our sense of security. Clinging to the illusion of control can lead to anxiety, frustration, and a feeling of helplessness when faced with the inevitable uncertainties of life. Existentialism invites us to confront this reality head-on, to embrace the void, and to find freedom in ambiguity. How can we stop fighting the inevitable? Uncertainty can be a catalyst for growth, creativity, and self-discovery. When we relinquish our need for control, we open ourselves to new possibilities and allow ourselves to adapt to changing circumstances. Embracing uncertainty allows us to live more fully in the present moment, appreciating the richness and complexity of life without being burdened by the fear of the unknown. This is not about recklessly abandoning responsibility. Rather, it is about accepting what we can't control to focus on that which we can, which offers a more meaningful and constructive existence. How then do we embrace the unknown? Cultivating a mindset of openness, flexibility, and resilience is essential for embracing uncertainty. We can practice mindfulness exercises, such as meditation and deep breathing, to cultivate a greater awareness of our thoughts and emotions. We can also use cognitive reframing techniques to challenge negative thought patterns and develop a more positive outlook. For instance, instead of viewing uncertainty as a threat, we can reframe it as an opportunity for growth and adventure. By embracing uncertainty, we can find a deeper sense of freedom and fulfillment in life. What part does choice play in this acceptance? The existentialist belief in radical freedom underscores the power of choice. Every decision, no matter how small, shapes our reality and defines who we are. From the clothes we wear to the careers we pursue, our choices reflect our values, our desires, and our understanding of the world. We are constantly creating ourselves through our actions, shaping our identities with every step we take. As Sartre famously put it, we are condemned to be free, burdened with the responsibility of making choices that determine the course of our lives. But just how far-reaching are the consequences of each decision? Our choices have a ripple effect, impacting not only ourselves, but also the people around us and the world at large. Consider the simple act of purchasing a cup of coffee. We might choose to support a local, ethically sourced coffee shop, contributing to our community and promoting sustainable business practices. Or we might opt for a cheaper, mass-produced option, inadvertently supporting exploitative labor practices and environmental degradation. Every choice, no matter how seemingly insignificant, has consequences that extend beyond our immediate experience. Is there a way to be completely certain of those consequences? Making conscious and deliberate choices is crucial for living an existentially meaningful life. Rather than simply reacting to external circumstances or following predefined paths, we can choose to act with intention, aligning our decisions with our values and our goals. This requires us to be mindful of our motivations, to question our assumptions, and to consider the potential consequences of our actions. By embracing conscious decision-making, we take ownership of our lives and create a reality that reflects our authentic selves. But in a world with no objective values, how do we choose correctly? In the absence of objective moral guidelines, we must develop our own framework for ethical decision-making based on personal values, empathy, and a commitment to responsibility. This framework should be grounded in rational thought, but also informed by our intuition and our emotional intelligence. We can ask ourselves, what kind of world do I want to create? How can I act in a way that is consistent with my values? What are the potential consequences of my actions? By engaging in this kind of ethical reflection, we can navigate the complexities of moral dilemmas and make choices that promote well-being, justice, and compassion. Having established these goals, how do we gauge success? Traditional notions of success are often based on external achievements, material wealth, or social status. These metrics are often imposed upon us by societal expectations, rather than reflecting our authentic values. Chasing after these external markers of success can lead to a life of dissatisfaction, emptiness, and a sense of being trapped in a never-ending cycle of striving. What truly defines a satisfying life? A more holistic definition of success encompasses personal growth, meaningful relationships, contribution to society, and alignment with one's values. This approach prioritizes inner fulfillment over external validation, focusing on creating a life that is rich in meaning, purpose, and connection. It recognizes that true success is not about accumulating wealth or achieving fame, but about becoming the best version of ourselves and making a positive impact on the world. Is the value of a life what we put into it, or what we get out of it? Finding a sense of purpose is crucial for living an existentially meaningful life. This purpose can be found through our work, our relationships, our hobbies, or any other activity that gives us a sense of meaning and direction. It is important to remember that existence precedes essence, and that we are not born with a predefined purpose. Instead, we must create our own meaning through our choices and actions. What will you make your purpose? The lives of individuals who have lived lives that are deeply meaningful and fulfilling, even if they are not considered successful by traditional standards, offer powerful inspiration. Consider the example of Vincent van Gogh, an artist who struggled with poverty and mental illness throughout his life, and who only achieved recognition after his death. Despite facing immense adversity, Van Gogh remained committed to his artistic vision, creating a body of work that has inspired and moved countless people. His life is a testament to the power of purpose, the transformative potential of creativity, and the enduring value of authenticity. In the end, it is not about achieving fame or fortune, but about living a life that is true to ourselves, and that makes a positive contribution to the world. But how do we remain true to ourselves when ourselves is constantly in flux? This is the paradox of authenticity. We often think of authenticity as adhering to a fixed, unchanging identity. It's the notion that we must remain consistent with some ideal version of ourselves, a snapshot frozen in time. But is this really possible or even desirable? Life is not a photograph, it's a moving film. Ourselves are constantly evolving and changing as we encounter new experiences, learn new things, and make new choices. We are not static beings, but dynamic processes, always in a state of becoming. To cling to a rigid identity is to deny the very nature of existence. If our understanding of physics has taught us anything, it is that everything changes. To resist that is to resist life. To embrace it is to discover it. What then does it really mean to be authentic? Authenticity is not a destination to be reached, but but an ongoing process of self-discovery and self-creation. It is about embracing the inherent fluidity of our being and allowing ourselves to evolve and transform. This requires a willingness to let go of old beliefs, to question our assumptions, and to step outside of our comfort zones. It means acknowledging that we will never fully arrive, but that the journey itself is what gives our lives meaning and purpose. To that end, we must treat ourselves with compassion. What part does forgiveness play in that compassion? Self-compassion is essential for living authentically, as it allows us to accept our imperfections and learn from our mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we all have flaws. To deny these aspects of ourselves is to deny our humanity. Self-compassion is about treating ourselves with the same kindness, understanding, and acceptance that we would offer to a close friend. It's about recognizing that we are all imperfect beings striving to do our best, and that it's okay to stumble along the way. It is about seeing your mistakes as opportunities for growth, not as indictments of character. But even with the best intentions, how do we ensure our thoughts translate into meaningful action? Existentialism emphasizes the importance of action as a means of defining ourselves and creating meaning. Merely thinking about our values, contemplating our goals, or intellectualizing our problems is not enough. We must take concrete steps to translate our thoughts into reality, to manifest our intentions in the world. As Sartre famously wrote, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." This underscores the pivotal role of action in self-creation. But is all action created equal? Too much thinking can lead to paralysis, a state of overanalysis and indecision that prevents us from taking action. We might get caught up in endless loops of what if, weighing the pros and cons of every possible scenario until we become frozen with fear. This tendency to overthink can be a form of bad faith, a way of avoiding responsibility for our choices by pretending that we are simply analyzing the situation. The truth is, sometimes we must simply act, trusting our intuition and embracing the uncertainty of the outcome. That first step is always the hardest, so how do we get ourselves to take it? Commitment is a conscious decision to dedicate ourselves to a particular course of action or set of values. It's about making a firm resolution to pursue a goal, even in the face of challenges or setbacks. Commitment is not a passive feeling, but an active choice that requires ongoing effort and dedication. It's about aligning our actions with our intentions and staying true to our values even when it's difficult. It is the compass that guides us through the storms of life, providing a sense of direction and purpose. But what happens when those storms threaten to overwhelm us? Perseverance is essential for achieving our goals and living a meaningful life, even in the face of challenges or setbacks. Life is rarely easy, and we will inevitably encounter obstacles, failures, and disappointments along the way. Perseverance is about refusing to give up, about learning from our mistakes, and about continuing to move forward despite the difficulties. It is the quality that separates those who succeed from those who fail, and it is a testament to the power of the human spirit. But how do we cultivate the mental fortitude to persevere? Fear is a natural and inevitable part of the human experience, and it often prevents us from taking action or living authentically. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of the unknown, these anxieties can hold us back from pursuing our dreams, expressing our true selves, and taking risks that are necessary for growth. As Susan Jeffers so eloquently stated, we must feel the fear and do it anyway. Fear can act as a self-imposed prison. So how do we break free? It's important to distinguish between healthy fear, which alerts us to genuine danger, and paralyzing fear, which prevents us from pursuing our goals. Healthy fear is a survival mechanism that helps us avoid real threats, such as walking alone in a dangerous neighborhood or engaging in risky behaviors. Paralyzing fear, on the other hand, is often based on irrational beliefs, negative thought patterns, or past experiences. It's the fear that whispers in our ear, telling us that we're not good enough, that we'll fail, or that we'll be rejected. It is that paralyzing fear that must be conquered if we are to live authentic lives. How then do we overcome this debilitating force? Strategies for managing fear include reframing negative thoughts, practicing mindfulness, and taking small, incremental steps. Reframing negative thoughts involves challenging our irrational beliefs and replacing them with more positive and realistic ones. Mindfulness involves paying attention to our thoughts and emotions without judgment, allowing us to observe our fears without being overwhelmed by them. Taking small, incremental steps involves breaking down our goals into manageable tasks, making it easier to overcome our initial resistance. Each small victory builds confidence and momentum. But if fear is an internal battle, how do we contend with external pressures? Society pressures us to conform to certain norms, expectations, and roles in various ways. These pressures are often subtle but powerful. We may feel pressure to dress a certain way, to pursue a particular career, to hold certain beliefs, or to behave in a certain manner. These expectations can come from our families, our friends, our colleagues, or even from the media. How do we navigate these societal currents without losing ourselves in the process? The psychological motivations behind conformity include the desire for approval, the fear of rejection, and the need for belonging. We are social creatures, and we naturally seek validation and acceptance from others. We may conform to group norms in order to fit in, to avoid criticism, or to gain status. This desire for belonging can be so strong that we may even suppress our own beliefs, values, and desires in order to maintain social harmony. To resist this pressure, we must first understand its source and its impact. How can we resist the urge to conform and still thrive in a social world? Conformity often leads to inauthenticity, alienation, and a lack of fulfillment. Fitting in does not equal happiness. When we suppress our true selves in order to meet external expectations, we can experience a deep sense of disconnect and emptiness. We may feel like we're living a lie, pretending to be someone we're not. This can lead to anxiety, depression, and a loss of purpose. The key is to find a balance between individuality and community, between expressing our true selves and maintaining meaningful relationships. How do we strike that balance? Strategies for resisting conformity and asserting our individuality include questioning authority, challenging norms, and expressing our unique perspectives. This is not about being rebellious for the sake of rebellion, but about thinking critically, making conscious choices, and standing up for what we believe in. It's about refusing to be defined by external forces and instead creating our own identities based on our values, our passions, and our experiences. It is about having the courage to be different, even when it's difficult. And what awaits us on the other side of that courage? Living authentically is associated with positive feelings, such as joy, freedom, purpose, and connection. In contrast to living in bad faith, where we feel trapped and unfulfilled, authenticity allows us to experience a deep sense of alignment and wholeness. We feel more alive, more engaged, and more connected to ourselves and to the world around us. It's as if we've finally come home to ourselves, embracing our true identities without apology or reservation. But how does this sense of authenticity translate into a meaningful existence? Authenticity is essential for finding meaning in life, as it allows us to align our actions with our values and pursue our passions. When we live authentically, we are not simply going through the motions or following someone else's script. We are actively creating our own meaning, shaping our lives in accordance with our deepest desires and aspirations. This sense of purpose gives us a reason to get out of bed in the morning, a source of motivation that sustains us through challenges and setbacks. By embracing our true selves, we ignite a spark that illuminates our path and inspires others. So, how do we share this light with others? Building relationships based on honesty, vulnerability, and mutual respect is of paramount importance. Authentic relationships are not based on pretense, manipulation, or superficiality. They are founded on a genuine connection between two people who are willing to be open, honest, and vulnerable with each other. This requires us to let go of our defenses to share our fears and insecurities, and to allow ourselves to be seen and known for who we truly are. Authentic relationships provide a safe space for growth, support, and unconditional love. What better foundation can one build? Embrace authenticity and live lives that are true to yourselves, even in the face of challenges or uncertainties. Every day is a chance to start anew, to make conscious choices that align with your values, and to move closer to your authentic selves. Don't be afraid to take risks, to challenge norms, or to express your unique perspectives. The world needs your authenticity, your creativity, and your passion. Step into your power, embrace your potential, and create a life that is rich in meaning, purpose, and connection. What will you do today to live more authentically? To truly grasp the essence of existentialism, it's crucial to distinguish it from other philosophical schools of thought that it is often confused with. How does existentialism truly set itself apart? Let's begin with determinism, the idea that all events, including human actions, are predetermined by prior causes. This perspective suggests that our choices are not truly free, but rather the inevitable outcome of a chain of events stretching back to the beginning of time. A determinist might argue that your career path was set in motion by your genetic predispositions, your upbringing, and your socio-economic circumstances, leaving you with little or no actual agency in the matter. In stark contrast, existentialism vehemently rejects this notion, asserting that we are radically free to define ourselves through our choices, regardless of our past. While determinism sees us as puppets of fate, existentialism proclaims that we are the authors of our own destinies. Consider, for example, someone who feels destined to follow in their family's footsteps and become a doctor. A determinist might say that this path was inevitable, while an existentialist would argue that the individual always has the freedom to choose a different path, even if it means defying expectations. That choice is a terrifying burden to carry. How does it compare to a philosophy that embraces that terror? Then there's absurdism, which emphasizes the inherent meaninglessness and irrationality of existence. Absurdists believe that there is no inherent purpose or order in the universe, and that our search for meaning is ultimately futile. While existentialism acknowledges the absence of preordained meaning, it diverges from absurdism by offering a framework for creating our own meaning through our choices and actions. An absurdist might conclude that suicide is the only logical response to the meaninglessness of existence, while an existentialist would advocate for rebellion, defiance, and the creation of subjective meaning in the face of the absurd. Consider the myth of Sisyphus, condemned to endlessly roll a boulder uphill only to have it roll back down. An absurdist might see Sisyphus's fate as a symbol of the futility of human existence, while an existentialist might see it as an opportunity for Sisyphus to find meaning in his struggle, to embrace his fate, and to find joy in the act of rolling the boulder. What happens if there isn't even something to rebel against? Nihilism goes even further, rejecting all values, beliefs, and objective truths. Nihilists believe that life is devoid of meaning, purpose, and value, and that there is no basis for morality or ethics. Existentialism, while acknowledging the lack of objective values, emphasizes the importance of creating our own subjective values and living in accordance with them. While a nihilist might embrace apathy and indifference, an existentialist would advocate for passionate engagement, commitment, and the creation of a personal moral code. Sartre argued that even our emotions are chosen, reflecting our values and commitments. If you choose to hate, you are exercising your free will and creating that value for yourself. If you love, you are similarly defining yourself. Therefore, we must strive to make those values align with our own freedom and responsibility. How does this philosophy put the burden of choice onto the individual? Existentialism's unique focus lies in its emphasis on individual freedom, responsibility, and the creation of meaning through action. It is an optimistic choice, a call to embrace our agency and to shape our own lives in a world without inherent meaning. Unlike determinism, which denies our freedom, absurdism, which revels in meaninglessness, and nihilism, which rejects all values, existentialism offers a path towards creating a meaningful and fulfilling existence, even in the face of uncertainty and absurdity. It's about recognizing that we are the artists of our own lives, the authors of our own stories, and the creators of our own values. How do we avoid deceiving ourselves about this awesome responsibility? Let's delve into more subtle and insidious forms of bad faith that often go unnoticed in our day-to-day lives. How often do we truly confront our own self-deceptions? Consider the everyday excuses we use to avoid taking responsibility for our lives. We might blame traffic for being late to a meeting, rather than acknowledging our poor time management skills. Or we might claim, I'm just not a creative person, to avoid pursuing artistic endeavors, masking a fear of failure or a lack of confidence. We even use the phrase, "That's just how I am," to justify negative behaviors, such as procrastination, irritability, or a lack of empathy, as if our personalities were fixed and unchangeable. These seemingly harmless excuses are often subtle forms of bad faith, ways of avoiding the discomfort of confronting our own shortcomings and taking ownership of our choices. Think about the times you found yourself making excuses. Were you truly powerless, or were you avoiding responsibility? Self-justifications are another common form of self-deception. We often rationalize our choices and actions, even when they contradict our values or harm ourselves or others. For instance, we might justify overspending by saying, "I deserve it," indulging in fleeting pleasures to compensate for deeper insecurities. Or we might rationalize infidelity by blaming a partner's shortcomings, avoiding the difficult work of addressing the underlying issues in the relationship. These justifications can be elaborate and convincing, but they are ultimately a way of avoiding the truth about our own motivations and actions. Have you ever caught yourself twisting the narrative to make your actions seem more justifiable? Adopting a victim mentality can also be a form of bad faith, as it allows us to avoid taking responsibility for our lives and circumstances. While it's true that we are all subject to external forces beyond our control, Sartre called this facticity, such as genetics, upbringing, and socioeconomic conditions, we always have a degree of agency in how we respond to these forces. A victim mentality, however, denies this agency, portraying us as helpless pawns of fate, incapable of shaping our own lives. It is the belief that everything is always happening to you. While acknowledging past traumas and current difficulties is crucial, wallowing in a sense of victimhood can prevent us from taking action to improve our situation. Remember, acknowledging your struggles doesn't require you to surrender your power. How does this victimhood interplay with societal pressures? These subtle forms of bad faith are often intertwined with societal pressures and expectations. We often internalize these pressures and use them as excuses for inauthentic behavior. For example, we might pursue a career that our parents approve of, even if it doesn't align with our own passions, telling ourselves that we're simply being responsible or practical. Or we might stay in a toxic relationship because we fear being alone, conforming to the societal expectation that we should be in a couple. These societal pressures can be insidious, shaping our choices in ways that we don't even realize, leading us to live lives that are out of sync with our true selves. In what ways might you be unknowingly conforming to societal expectations, sacrificing your own authenticity in the process? But if we are all free to create our own values, are all choices equally valid? This question leads us to the problem of subjectivity. Existentialism's emphasis on individual freedom and the creation of subjective meaning raises the specter of moral relativism, the belief that all values are equally valid. If there is no objective standard of morality, then doesn't that mean that anything goes? This is a common objection to existentialism, a concern that it can lead to a chaotic and lawless world where individuals are free to pursue their own selfish desires without regard for the consequences. However, Such a conclusion is an oversimplification of a much deeper philosophy. Is there a way to reconcile individual freedom with ethical responsibility? While existentialism rejects the notion of objective morality, it does not imply that all choices are equally valid. Sartre himself argued that some choices are more authentic and responsible than others. Authenticity, in this context, means living in accordance with one's own values, taking ownership of one's choices, and accepting responsibility for the consequences. Responsibility means considering the impact of our actions on ourselves and others, striving to create a world that is more just, compassionate, and sustainable. To take ownership of your life is to also take ownership of your impact. Is there such a thing as authentic values? We must emphasize the importance of creating values that are consistent with our own freedom and responsibility, and that promote the well-being of ourselves and others. These values are not arbitrary or whimsical, but are grounded in a deep understanding of our own needs, desires, and capabilities, as well as a recognition of our interconnectedness with the world around us. Authentic values are those that resonate with our deepest selves, that inspire us to live with purpose and integrity, and that guide us towards a more fulfilling and meaningful existence. To justify these values, you must ask the difficult questions. You must subject your beliefs to constant scrutiny. How does your code withstand pressure? The consequences of our choices are also relevant to their moral evaluation. Choices that cause harm to ourselves or others are less valid than choices that promote flourishing. While existentialism acknowledges the subjectivity of values, it does not ignore the objective reality of consequences. Our actions have a ripple effect, impacting the lives of those around us and shaping the world we live in. Therefore, we must strive to make choices that are not only authentic, but also ethical, considering the impact of our actions on the well-being of all. In the absence of any moral compass, it is critical that you serve as your own. But remember that one choice cannot define you. How can we make authenticity a continuous project? Living authentically is not a one-time achievement, but an ongoing process of self-discovery and self-creation. Every day presents new opportunities to align our actions with our values, to challenge our self-deceptions, and to take responsibility for our choices. To cultivate authenticity, we can practice self-reflection, challenging societal norms, embracing vulnerability, and taking responsibility for our choices. Self-reflection involves taking time to examine our thoughts, feelings, and motivations, gaining a deeper understanding of our own inner landscape. Challenging societal norms requires us to question the assumptions and expectations that are imposed upon us, making conscious choices about which norms to embrace and which to reject. Embracing vulnerability means allowing ourselves to be seen and known for who we truly are, imperfections and all, fostering deeper connections with others. Taking responsibility for our choices means owning the consequences of our actions, learning from our mistakes, and striving to make amends when we cause harm. These are all steps on an unending road. What, then, are the rewards for traveling it? The positive outcomes associated with living authentically include increased joy, meaning, connection, and fulfillment. When we are true to ourselves, we experience a deep sense of alignment and wholeness, as if we're finally living the lives we were meant to live. We feel more alive, more engaged, and more connected to ourselves and to the world around us. Authentic relationships flourish, creativity blossoms, and we discover a sense of purpose that guides us through the ups and downs of life. By embracing authenticity, we unlock our full potential and create a life that is rich in meaning, purpose, and connection. How can a philosophy like existentialism guide us? Existentialism offers a framework for creating a meaningful and fulfilling life, even in the face of uncertainty and absurdity. It empowers us to take ownership of our lives, to define our own values, and to create our own meaning in a world without inherent purpose. It challenges us to confront our self-deceptions, to embrace our freedom and responsibility, and to live authentically in accordance with our deepest selves. It is a philosophy that celebrates the human spirit, recognizing our capacity for both greatness and fallibility, and inspiring us to strive towards a more just, compassionate, and sustainable world. But how does this translate into the grand scheme of things? Let's take a closer look at how existentialism grapples with the concept of the other and the implications it holds for our understanding of self and society. As profound and insightful as existentialism can be, it's crucial to acknowledge that it is not a panacea for all of life's challenges. Are there situations where existentialism falls short, where its radical emphasis on individual freedom and responsibility proves insufficient? Indeed, there are instances where the existentialist framework, with its focus on individual agency, may not adequately address complex issues. Consider severe mental illness, for example. A person grappling with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder may find it difficult, if not impossible, to exercise the kind of rational self-reflection that existentialism demands. The symptoms of their illness, such as delusions, hallucinations, or extreme mood swings, can severely impair their ability to make free and responsible choices. In such cases, medical intervention, therapy, and social support are often necessary to stabilize their condition before existential self-reflection can even begin. To suggest that someone in the throes of a psychotic episode can simply choose to be well is not only insensitive, but also deeply misguided. Similarly, victims of systemic oppression or extreme trauma may find it challenging to embrace existentialism's emphasis on individual responsibility. A person who has been subjected to years of abuse, discrimination, or violence may understandably struggle to take ownership of their lives and choices. The psychological scars of trauma can run deep, undermining their sense of self-efficacy and making it difficult to imagine a different future. External help, such as trauma-informed therapy and social justice advocacy, is often essential to help them heal and reclaim their agency. Can we risk creating a philosophy that is only applicable to those who are healthy enough to use it? Furthermore, the constant pressure to make choices and take responsibility, a cornerstone of existentialism, can lead to what we might call existential overload. The weight of freedom, the realization that we are condemned to be free, can become overwhelming, leading to anxiety, paralysis, or burnout. Think of the entrepreneur who pours every ounce of their being into their business, driven by the existential imperative to create their own meaning and purpose. They work tirelessly, sacrificing their personal relationships, their health, and their well-being in pursuit of success. But eventually, the relentless pressure to make decisions, to innovate, to compete, and to take responsibility for every aspect of their business can become unbearable. They may experience panic attacks, chronic fatigue, and a deep sense of emptiness, realizing that their pursuit of meaning has come at a terrible cost. This isn't to say that existentialism is inherently harmful, but rather that it must be practiced with awareness, balance, and a recognition of its limitations. As we discussed earlier, facticity, those aspects of our existence that are beyond our control, can significantly impact our ability to exercise our freedom. How, then, do we find a balance between self-reflection and support? Finding a balance between existential self-reflection and other forms of support is paramount. Existentialism need not be an isolated pursuit. It can be integrated with therapy, community, or spiritual practices. These are not mutually exclusive, but complementary approaches to living a more meaningful and fulfilling life. A person might combine existential philosophy with mindfulness meditation, using meditation to cultivate self-awareness and emotional regulation, thereby enhancing their ability to make conscious choices. Or they might engage in social activism, working with others to create a more just and equitable world, finding meaning and purpose in collective action. A spiritual practice might provide a sense of connection to something larger than themselves, offering comfort and guidance in the face of uncertainty. The key is to find a combination of approaches that works for each individual recognizing that there is no one-size-fits-all solution to the challenges of existence. How can we remember to look outside ourselves? We must also caution against becoming overly focused on one's own freedom and authenticity to the detriment of empathy and compassion for others. Existentialism, at its worst, can devolve into a kind of navel-gazing narcissism, where individuals become so preoccupied with their own self-creation that they lose sight of the needs and perspectives of those around them. Remember the look, the awareness of being perceived by others, and how this impacts our self-understanding. If we become too fixated on our own self-image, we risk ignoring the reality of others' experiences and treating them as mere objects in our own subjective world. It's crucial to cultivate empathy, to actively listen to and understand the perspectives of others, and to recognize our shared humanity. Existentialism should not be used as a justification for selfishness or indifference, but rather as a foundation for building more meaningful and compassionate relationships. But is Sartre's philosophy the end of the road? Sartre's interpretation of existentialism is just one branch of a much larger and more diverse philosophical tree. Many other thinkers have built upon, expanded, or challenged his ideas, offering unique perspectives on the human condition. Simone de Beauvoir, for example, made groundbreaking contributions to feminist existentialism, exploring the ways in which women's freedom and authenticity are constrained by societal expectations and patriarchal structures. Her seminal work, The Second Sex, is a powerful critique of the social construction of gender and a call for women to reclaim their agency and define their own identities. Albert Camus, while often associated with existentialism, ultimately distanced himself from the label, developing his own philosophy of the absurd and advocating for rebellion against injustice and oppression. Frantz Fanon, a psychiatrist and political philosopher, explored the existential dimensions of colonialism and racism, examining the psychological impact of oppression on the colonized subject and calling for liberation and self-determination. What other interpretations are there? Existentialism itself is not a monolithic entity, but rather encompasses a variety of different interpretations and applications. Religious existentialism, for example, seeks to integrate faith with the principles of freedom and responsibility. Thinkers like Søren Kierkegaard and Paul Tillich argued that faith is not a blind acceptance of dogma, but a passionate and personal commitment made in the face of uncertainty and doubt. Humanistic existentialism, championed by figures like Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers, emphasizes the inherent goodness and potential of human beings, viewing existentialism as a framework for personal growth and self-actualization. Even environmental existentialism applies existential principles to ecological issues, arguing that we have a responsibility to protect the environment and create a more sustainable future, recognizing our interconnectedness with the natural world. The breadth of these different branches demonstrates the enduring relevance and adaptability of existentialism as a philosophical framework. But how does it hold up in the modern era? Existentialism remains a valuable tool for understanding the human condition in the 21st century. In a world increasingly characterized by technological advancements, globalization, and social inequality, existentialism offers a framework for navigating the challenges of modernity and creating a more meaningful and fulfilling life. It can help us grapple with the ethical implications of artificial intelligence, the social impact of globalization, and the persistent problem of social injustice. By embracing our freedom, taking responsibility for our choices, and creating our own values, we can find purpose and meaning in a world that often feels chaotic and uncertain. Existentialism offers a powerful antidote to the alienation, anomie, and despair that can plague modern life, empowering us to become the authors of our own destinies and to create a world that reflects our deepest values. If you wish to explore these ideas further, I would recommend delving into the works of Sartre, Beauvoir, Camus, and other existentialist thinkers. Numerous articles and websites also offer insightful analyses and interpretations of existentialism. But is it possible to take it too far? A common criticism leveled against existentialism is that it is overly individualistic, neglecting our responsibility to others. This critique suggests that by focusing on individual freedom and self-creation, existentialism ignores the importance of social connection, community, and solidarity. However, this is a misunderstanding of the philosophy's core tenets. Is there a way to reconcile the importance of freedom with the need to care for others? Existentialism, in fact, provides a strong foundation for social responsibility. Sartre argued that our freedom is inextricably linked to the freedom of others. When we make choices, we are not only defining ourselves, but also shaping the world around us, impacting the lives of those with whom we share it. If we act in ways that undermine the freedom of others, we are ultimately undermining our own freedom. Therefore, we have a moral obligation to respect and promote the well-being of others, recognizing that their freedom is essential for our own. To deny others freedom is to deny your own potential. But how do we turn that into action? Solidarity is a commitment to working with others to create a more just and equitable society, and is a key concept here. This involves recognizing our shared humanity, acknowledging the systemic injustices that exist in the world, and taking collective action to address them. It means standing in solidarity with the oppressed, the marginalized, and the vulnerable, working alongside them to create a world where everyone has the opportunity to flourish. Solidarity is not simply a feeling of empathy or compassion, but a concrete commitment to action, to working towards a more just and equitable world. What might that look like? Existential principles can guide ethical action in a variety of contexts. In environmentalism, for example, existentialism can inspire us to take responsibility for our impact on the planet, recognizing that our choices have far-reaching consequences for future generations. In social justice, it can motivate us to challenge systemic inequalities, working to create a society where everyone has equal opportunities and access to resources. In political activism, it can empower us to resist oppression and fight for a more democratic and just world. These examples demonstrate that existentialism is not simply an abstract philosophical theory, but a powerful framework for ethical action and social change. What ultimate vision do these actions share? Existentialism rejects the search for easy answers and predefined solutions, a stark contrast to philosophies that offer a neat and tidy worldview. We must embrace ambiguity and uncertainty and resist the temptation to cling to rigid beliefs or ideologies. A true understanding of existentialism requires the courage to face the unknown, to question everything, and to create our own meaning in a world without inherent purpose. But how do we make sure to keep our minds open? We must challenge the desire for dogma, that comforting but ultimately stifling tendency to cling to rigid beliefs or ideologies as a way of avoiding the discomfort of uncertainty. Dogma offers the illusion of security and control, providing simple answers to complex questions and shielding us from the messy realities of existence. But it comes at a cost. By clinging to dogma, we close ourselves off to new possibilities, stifle our creativity, and limit our capacity for growth. Instead, we must cultivate a spirit of intellectual humility, acknowledging the limits of our own knowledge and remaining open to new perspectives and insights. Why is it so critical to question our own assumptions? By developing our critical thinking skills and questioning everything, including our own assumptions and beliefs, we can make true progress. Critical thinking involves analyzing information objectively, identifying biases and fallacies, and forming our own judgments based on evidence and reason. It requires us to be skeptical, curious, and open-minded, willing to challenge conventional wisdom and to consider alternative viewpoints. By honing our critical thinking skills, we can become more informed, more discerning, and more empowered to make our own decisions. As Socrates said, The unexamined life is not worth living. What happens when we disagree? Open and respectful dialogue is essential for navigating complex issues and finding common ground, even when we disagree. Dialogue involves listening to others with empathy and respect, seeking to understand their perspectives, and engaging in constructive conversation. It requires us to set aside our own biases and preconceptions, to be willing to challenge our own beliefs, and to find common ground with those who hold different views. Dialogue is not about winning an argument or proving someone wrong, but about seeking truth, building understanding, and creating a more inclusive and compassionate world. We should seek to understand, not to defeat. So what is the ultimate lesson here? We must challenge the common view of responsibility as a burden and reframe it as an opportunity to create a meaningful and fulfilling life. Remember that we are not defined by our circumstances, but by our choices. By embracing our freedom and taking responsibility for our actions, we become the authors of our own stories, shaping our lives in accordance with our deepest values. This is the ultimate freedom, the understanding that comes from accepting and taking responsibility for one's life. Get ready to consider the transformative power of existentialism and its potential to lead to a more authentic and meaningful existence, because it is the central theme of the video's final message. Remember, existentialism, in its essence, reveals that existence precedes essence, underscoring that we are born without a predefined script. We are condemned to be free, burdened with the responsibility of forging our own meaning, and are constantly faced with anguish, often tempting us to evade this responsibility through bad faith. The look reminds us that we are always seen, always judged, and always responsible for the image we project to the world. It's a philosophy that demands constant self-reflection and can seem daunting, yet it's this very challenge that holds the key to a richer existence. It's not an easy path, and it requires a willingness to constantly challenge societal norms and confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves. But what if we shift our perspective? What if we see this freedom not as a burden, but as an extraordinary opportunity? Freedom, in the existential sense, isn't merely the absence of constraints. It is the empowering realization that you are the author of your own life, the artist of your own soul. I challenge you to examine the masks you wear, the roles you play to appease others, and to dare to live authentically, even when it's difficult. Start small. Identify one area in your life where you're acting in bad faith. Perhaps it's a job you stay in because it's safe, despite it stifling your creativity, or a relationship where you compromise your values to avoid conflict. Take one small step today towards aligning your actions with your authentic self. Living authentically allows you to forge deeper, more meaningful connections, experience greater joy, and ultimately to craft a life that is truly your own. The ultimate revelation of existentialism lies in understanding that true freedom and fulfillment arise not from escaping responsibility, but from wholeheartedly embracing it. It's a paradox, isn't it? But think about it. By taking ownership of our choices, we become active creators of our lives and contribute to the world, thereby imbuing our existence with meaning and purpose. As Sartre himself said, man is condemned to be free, because once thrown into the world, he is responsible for everything he does. Embrace this responsibility, not as a weight, but as the very essence of your being. Existentialism isn't a set of rigid rules. It's a framework for crafting a life uniquely yours. Embrace the freedom, take responsibility, and find your own path. To further explore this philosophy, I encourage you to delve into the works of Sartre, de Beauvoir, Camus, and other existentialist thinkers. Explore online forums and communities dedicated to existentialism. Engage with others, share your thoughts, and challenge your own assumptions. What are your core values? What are your deepest fears? What kind of world do you aspire to create? I'd love to hear your thoughts on existentialism. Share your reflections and questions in the comments below. Let's foster a community of shared exploration and discovery. But remember, the time for mere reflection is over. Now is the time for action. Embrace your radical freedom, take responsibility for your life, and create the world you were meant to live.